So Kevin, I'm here with Kevin, the CEO of Avasant, and Kevin, as a third-party advisor, how do you really define success in an outsourcing engagement today?
Yeah, Joe. First of all, when you look at success of any deal, it has to not just achieve the financial targets of savings and whatnot, but really the business targets. It can't be a deal where the service provider wins too much or the client wins too much. A win-win deal is going to be a well-balanced deal. It's going to achieve the business objectives, and I think that's primary.
So as a third-party advisor, okay, and you're entering into a conversation with a client, how do you define success between him and you? How do you define the way in which you know that is going to be a successful relationship for both of you?
Yeah, well, Joe, you've been on both sides, so you know what it's like. And I think really a third-party advisor has to be a trusted advisor because as providers and advisors, we want the best for the client. That is one thing that we have in common. But the third-party advisor has a bit of a special role to be that trusted advisor, the party that is going to have access to all the information from both sides and really needs to play fair dealing.
So in that role as an honest broker,
Yeah.
so to speak, between both you, the provider, and the client, how do you make the provider feel comfortable because you're being retained by the client but not the provider?
I think it's important to run a very fair process. And one of the differentiators that we have at Avasant, for example, is we try to create a very an open process whereby we can really collect the right requirements not only from the client but also strategy and opportunity from the provider. It means that we still have a very focused requirements-driven selection process, but we have to align those with great business strategy and new opportunities coming from the provider community.
So what would you say to a client if they asked you, said, what do I really need in my third-party advisor?
Yeah.
What is it that I should really expect from them? And how should I use them properly? Especially in today's world when we're dealing with second and third generation outsourcing type of arrangements.
Yeah, you need an experienced consultant, and I think that probably sounds like a very obvious answer. But you need someone that doesn't just understand the mechanics of the transaction, but actually understands how to get to a good deal, which in some cases might mean changing scope, it might mean client pushback, it might mean re-engineering the strategy even if the strategy was not done correctly. And I think you need that smart advisor that's going to be able to come in and not just go by the playbook, because as you know, a company that's gone through 2 or 3 deals, they have a playbook. They've got a contract, they probably have documentation, and if we really want to get to that right deal, it's the 10% around the edges that we adjust to make sure that it's really going to be successful.
So do you see it, whether it's ITO or BPO today, do you see it really as a price transaction? Or do you see usually as price being kind of a parity kind of situation today?
Well, I think price is always a matter of issue, right? I mean, clients care about it. It's on their mind. But I think that when you look at ITO and you look at BPO, there's a bit of a convergence in the way client decision-making is happening. And you see it with the CIO today. And in many cases, CIOs are actually, some may argue, becoming less powerful, or they're becoming more focused on the business, right? Because it's not the IT function itself that's so critical. It's the business alignment that's critical. So whether it's an IT issue or a BPO issue, it's getting those business requirements correct, getting the strategy aligned with the business, and then of course we like to get some cost savings too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Everybody likes to get some cost savings. So, but from another viewpoint though, as you're sitting there thinking about this,
Yeah.
okay, and you deal with so many different clients in so many different verticals,
Right.
whether it's in the entertainment space, the manufacturing space, the retail space, et cetera, government, in terms of where you're going, and service providers as well. What's more important, the horizontal experience of understanding infrastructure, understanding applications, understanding process, or understanding the vertical, and how do you establish that confidence, with your client that you're going to really be there to help him through this process and really help him through his business?
Well, it's a great question. I could probably go on for about 30 minutes on it, but I'll try to keep it really short.
Okay.
From a horizontal standpoint, historically, advisors have been focused on horizontals because the breadth may not be there for the vertical focus. But increasingly in our industry, and Avasant recently also verticalized its processes for offering sourcing advisory services. So we now have a vertical lead in across government, across private sector, retail, manufacturing, BFSI, et cetera. Why? We have to have that vertical focus because the alignment with the customer business requirements, as we just talked about, have changed so substantially as to why people outsource. It's not just about price anymore, right? There are many other factors. Right. And so you really have to understand the business drivers, and that's what's forced even our business to be more focused on the vertical. I think historically it's been a horizontal focus, but I think that's changing.
What do you see the biggest mistakes that, say, a service provider makes in dealing with a third-party advisor?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think the role of the third-party advisor is to create successful opportunities for a client to choose from. So we have to take sometimes a mediocre bid and help, maybe through a best and final offer process, that provider become more competitive. We want to make providers that are already very competitive better, and we want to get get everyone ready for the selection process. And I think if providers view the advisor in a contentious way, I think that can spoil the relations. And really, if they look at us as a means to an end, that we're really trying to help them, put their best foot forward. At least that's our culture at Avasant. Now, there are different advisors. I can't speak to how they operate.
So from a client viewpoint, what would you advise a client on how to deal, with the providers in this kind of a process? How should they really utilize you to get the maximum effort, the maximum benefit of a relationship that will definitely stand the test of time?
Well, increasingly, our clients use us as a channel. They'll use us as a channel to communicate with a provider because maybe their process may not allow for it, or they want data, they want information. And we have as you know, we have a provider outreach program where we collect a lot of information on the providers that are in the mix. And that's very helpful. We share that information with clients. And that gives them access to you, even if their procurement process might prohibit them from having a conversation. Because we've been collecting that information for many, many years, we have the ability to share that data that you may not be able to.
Yeah, so one final question. Do you think that it's a benefit to the client to keep you involved after the transaction, as well as the benefit of the service provider whom they select, and why?
Well, this has been the big topic of discussion, and I think it all depends on the incentives. If our incentives in a phase 3 is what we call it, a governance transaction, which happens after a deal is struck, is really focused on the more consultants we bring in, we're going to find problems and we're going to try to create issues, then I think it can't work. Because an advisor's role really needs to be aligned with a provider's role in that situation. We both have to be focused on keeping the boat moving smoothly and to the contract and to the requirements and making adjustments as we'll need to over time. And if the financial incentives are structured the right way and the business requirements for the customer are structured the right way, it can be very successful. But I've also seen it not work well too.
Definitely. Because I think we both would agree, in terms of as we begin to do these kinds of transactions more and more every day, they're becoming more complicated with the technology changing. Definitely takes a village to get it done. Takes a village with a lot of different pieces and a lot of different talent. So definitely, we really appreciate Avasant. We appreciate being in the market with them, and definitely enjoy being part of the village with you.
Well, Joe,
so
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.